everyone. I'm Chris Sumrick, Executive Director of Humanities Nebraska, and welcome to another edition of our Humanities at Home live programming. And I can't believe, let's see, we've been in this whole COVID-19 social distancing thing for what, 5-6 weeks now. So we're all going a little stir crazy, but at least the sun is shining and, we can get outside a little bit. But unfortunately, we still haven't been able to have many of our events going on and programs together in person yet, but we have been adapting to that by doing things like this right now and trying to connect you with our the great people, the amazing creative people we work with all over the state with Humanities Nebraska, including through our Speakers Bureau and otherwise. Today, last day of April, is the end of National Poetry Month. April is National Poetry Month. So if you're listening last week, we had state poet Matt Mason on, and it was fabulous to chat with Matt. And like the other ones we've done before, you can still find that on our Facebook page and our YouTube page. But we thought we'd go out with a bang on National Poetry Month by bringing on another one of our wonderful poet speakers, Michelle Troxclair. And I'll introduce Michelle in just a moment. Just to remind you, Humanities Nebraska is a statewide nonprofit organization funded in part by the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Nebraska Cultural Endowment, the state of Nebraska, and especially private donations from people like you. So we really appreciate all the people that support our work throughout the state. And we really look forward to seeing you in person again soon. But in the meantime, we'll keep doing this and we'll have fun with it as we can. So I am going to introduce for you our speaker today, and we're going to have a little conversation, and we're going to be looking for comments and questions from you. And since we call this Humanities at Home, one of the things that's fun is seeing where y'all are from. So when you make your comments or questions, maybe share where home is for you, and we'll share that on there. Erica Hamilton, our Director of Literary Programs, is with us too, and Erica will be coming in helping share those questions with Michelle, and we'll just see where the conversation goes. So Michelle Troxclair is a poet and a spoken word artist in the African American oral tradition. She's a community activist and an arts advocate. She's written poetry for more than 40 years, so I think she was -5 when she started that. And she has published in several literary magazines and anthologies. She performs original poetry for more than 22 years now. She has a bachelor's in English and a master's in public administration and fine arts and poetry. She works with youth and artists throughout the city of Omaha. She's worked with the Nebraska Writers Collective for the past 5 years, and Matt Mason, our state poet, is executive director of the Nebraska Writers Collective, so you learned about them a little bit last week. She heads their program that works with incarcerated youth at the Douglas County Youth Correctional Center and young people at the Blackburn Alternative High School as well. She teaches youth the power of words and the value of their voices and experiences. She has also established a nonprofit called Verse to make poetry exciting and relevant for future generations. And she's been involved in a number of projects in that way. She advocates for her community and for artists through her radio show, Michael and Michelle in the Morning, which is on Mind and Soul 101.3 FM. And I believe that's 7 to 9 in the morning on weekdays. We'll talk more about that too. And she's in the Humanities Nebraska Speakers Bureau, giving a program called Journey of the Spoken Word. So without further ado, please welcome Michelle Troxclair. And Michelle, I'm going to start off with the same question I asked Matt Mason last week. In the spirit of National Poetry Month, just be curious to start off, maybe if you could share a little bit about how you wound up in the world of poetry and your journey into the world of poetry.
Well, when you made the comment, because I've been a poet, I was born a poet evidently, but I actually had my first poem published when I was in the first grade. So I had been a page poet, but kind of just as a hobby in the closet or whatever, throughout my childhood and teen years, and never really thought it was anything other than what you do at home, just something to do on the side to help one's own mental health and have a cleansing experience or whatever. So there was that. My introduction into spoken word poetry came in the 90s when I met Felicia Webster. And she had an open mic that she had started over at Daisy Mae's Cafe, which was on 13th and Jackson, I believe. And she and I started working together. It was an after-school program. It was Network Inc. And I did English and social studies, and she did math and some arts-based stuff there. And she invited me to her open mic. So I was like, okay, I'd written some poetry that I could read, and so I got up there and I did one. I won't say the name of it. And I got this huge applause. And, the whole time I'm standing up there, I'm absolutely terrified. My knees are shaking. And as I read this piece. Now, thankfully I had on a skirt so no one could see my knees were shaking. But I read this poem and I get this huge, wonderful reception. And from there, I was bitten by the performance bug of that. So that would have been in 97, I believe. So from 97 to today, I have really gotten into the history of spoken word poetry, the power of it, the way it affects people on an emotional, on a gut level, how it heals people, how it brings people together, how it speaks truth to power, and how it shines lights in dark places and those things. So that's how I got into it and really began to love it as an art form.
That really resonates with me because the first time I saw you perform spoken word poetry was the first time I experienced spoken word poetry. And it was at the Loves Jazz and Arts Center, maybe, gosh, it's been at least 10 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just floored. And it was an amazing experience. And I believe Felicia Webster was part of that as well. Mm-hmm. And I just found it was just this, it's hard for somebody like me to articulate, so I'm going to ask you to do that. But, just the intersection of performance and almost a kind of a musical sort of aspect to it too. And I'm just wondering, could you share with people who aren't familiar with spoken word poetry a little bit about that as an art form mm-hmm. of poetry?
When you read my bio and it says I do spoken word poetry in the African American oral tradition, it is very much a part of the African American oral tradition. It spans back thousands of years. It was a way by which the griot of the tribe would record history and pass it down from generation to generation. And it was a way to remember cultural traditions, familial traditions. So it was incredibly important to the culture. And it did survive the Middle Passage, survived slavery, and has been an integral part of African-American culture from day one. And so there are certain pieces that actually have survived from Africa, from West Africa, and are still performed today. One would be the Signifying Monkey, another one would be Shine, and then the stories such as Anansi the Spider, and there's a number of them. And my father and his brothers used to do a performance of the Signifying Monkey together. My father is the eldest brother of 6. And they would sit around my grandmother's kitchen table and do that. I remember them doing that when I was maybe in my early 20s and just floored by it. I come from a long line of amazing storytellers. My grandmother, my father is an amazing storyteller. And I think that I have been gifted with the ability to do that and the desire to do it. So I'm sort of my family griot. But it is so incredibly important as part of the culture that we continue it. And so I feel as though it's my charge to make sure young people understand the ins and outs of it. And I'll get into that as well. Spoken word, the way it differs from page poetry, is that it is very raw, very hard hitting. There's not a lot of room for all the beautiful imagery and flowery words and all of the description and all of that, because unlike page poetry, spoken word is a way to connect with people on a gut level, and you have a very brief opportunity to do that. And your audience is sitting right in front of you. It's not that they can go back and read and reread and get something different every time, you know. It's got to be right there, right then. And so the language is a little different. They're longer than page poems usually, more on the line of epic poems. There's musicality to them a lot of times, not always, but a lot of musicality to it. So rap artists are spoken word artists in the African-American oral tradition. It is part of the culture. And so that's included. I always say that not every spoken word artist is a rapper, but every rapper is a spoken word artist. So, well, yeah.
That's a fantastic description. And so I can't think of any better time than to maybe, if you're willing right now, to just give us an example of whether it's be one of the ones in the deeper tradition or something of your own, whatever you think, whatever you're moved to share.
Okay. There's one that I feel like I should do, considering I wrote it during the COVID-19 thing, because believe it or not, a lot of us, we thought we could go into this quarantine thing and be okay. As long as, you know, we were getting some stimulus money, our finances may not go down the tubes, that we could, but it's very depressing. And it's, you spend a lot of time in your own head. Yeah. And sometimes that's not a good thing. Yeah. And so I wrote this because I felt myself going down the rabbit hole. And one thing about writing poetry is it helps you identify what's going on and address it. And so this is a piece that I wrote maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. And I've felt a little better ever since. So great. It's called Here I Stand. I've dropped something or left something very important behind. I can't muster the energy or the motivation to look over my shoulder. Perhaps I fear turning to a pillar of salt, but I can't move forward. I can't put one foot in front of the other. My 6-inch heels I used to strut in are in the closet collecting dust, along with my pens and notebooks. I've purchased more comfortable shoes than I can wear. The ones I've chosen to wear this day must be made of lead. The path before me is freshly poured concrete, the fog dangling about me thick as my daughter's afro. It strangles me, and I don't have it in me to fight it, not anymore. The virus was here long before anyone was sick. The symptoms displayed themselves at a golden corral. All we could eat. We fingered each utensil, transferring tears, sweat, spit, snot, piss, and shit, and greed, envy, lust, pride, wrath, gluttony, sloth, and shit. Dumped full food upon our plates, consumed more than we should, disposed of the rest, and exited without a second thought. Again, fear of turning to a pillar of salt. Fought all the right battles and all the wrong wars, marched backwards, knees high. We've been going in circles. The whole forest for the trees thing. And now the wet concrete that was supposed to be the way forward hardens around my ankles, and I want to lie down, but my knees won't bend. I think I shall die here, but my spirit won't allow it. I've been raised by too many strong women, and I'm too Black for that, I think. That's it. Light shines in dark places. I've dropped my hope. I must have dropped it when I fell into my 50s, or perhaps when we elected a despot. I've left behind my youth and dreams, the dreams that held her hand. And as they skipped along unbeaten paths and unpaved roads, I no longer could smell the scent of want. I no longer wished upon stars or threw pennies into fountains. I won't blow out birthday candles. They were lit by liars and hateful men. And so here I stand beneath a halo, a corona, in the sludge of transgressions, past sins, packed like slave ships with myths of utopia tugging at my soul. I've dropped my hope, listening for the galloping of 4 horses in the mist. And I am too numb to retrieve it. So here I stand. That's it.
Wow.
Yeah.
The powerful imagery, and you're tapping into things that, well, for me, some of it, I feel like I can relate to that emotion and that feeling, and other things I can't. And everybody's, and it's just, so, I mean, thank you for sharing it. And we do have a question, but I want to ask you, when you write something like that at a time like this, how do you feel afterwards, like in terms of that creativity and putting that down, and how do you feel once you're done?
To be very graphic, it's like taking a dump and flushing the toilet.
Now that maybe I can relate to, I don't know.
Yeah. It's like, okay, that's out. Whew, okay. Because once you put words to it and get it out, it's not festering inside.
Yeah.
And so what I tell young people when I work with them, I'm like, write it out. Write yourself well. Because the more it sits and marinates in there, it festers and it molds and it mildews. And and then it comes out in ways that are not positive. It comes out in bad decision making, impulse behavior. It comes out in so many other ugly ways. So
I can appreciate that. We've, Humanities Nebraska, our staff has been talking about this kind of thing, about different ways to express ourselves creatively, to just, clear our minds, or, or physical activity is another thing, and so, but those of us who don't have that creative fount like you, it's just remarkable to hear it. So I think we'll at least, hopefully one more you can read at some point, but let's get to a question. Erica, did you say we have a question now?
Yeah, we do have a question. I do want to let you know, Michelle, that a lot of our viewers have commented either with applause or saying that your poem was very powerful. So they really appreciated that.
Thank you.
The question is from Wendy Hill Smith from Lincoln. She says, what inspires you to write your poetry?
It's usually something that has an emotional effect on me. So if I'm angry about something that's going on in the world, or if it's someone in history I feel that needs to be honored, sadness can sometimes, I frequently write myself well. So yeah, occasionally it'll be something humorous, though rare. So yeah, just whatever affects me emotionally. Because I write from my soul, I write from my spirit. So it has to move my soul and my spirit in some way.
That seems,
so I hope that answers it.
Very personal. And one thing that I guess I wonder about that is, does it feel vulnerable?
It used to. I think with age comes, you don't care anymore what people think about you, or how people judge you. So yeah, when I hit on the other side of 40, maybe 45, I was like, who cares? Because I think the process of writing and performing, you learn that a lot of times what affects you emotionally and the things that you write about, you have in commonality with someone else. There are many more people out there that are feeling the way you feel than are judging you. So that took some time to figure out, but yeah.
That makes sense. And after I crossed 50, I started feeling a little bit of the same way. It's one of the the nice things about getting older, I guess, is that liberating feeling of not worrying so
Mhm.
much about what other people think about everything. Which leads me to a question, I guess, about your work with youth. And,
Mhm.
in particular, as I read in your bio, incarcerated youth is one group you work with. And just so whether you address that and specifically or just other youth in general, what are your reflections on the kind of work you're doing with youth and where they're at these days? And I guess a follow-up would be, how much have you
Mhm.
been able to do that in the last few weeks, or staying connected with youth and how they're doing at this time?
Well, I have not. I have no access to my kids in DCYC. Ran into one of the women who works as a guard there uh, at a hardware store, and she said they need you really badly. They're struggling, and that, as much as I hate that they're struggling, it was good to hear how they miss what it is that we do there.
And by DCYC, you're talking about Douglas County Youth Corrections?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Um, what we do, we teach from a very different perspective. We're coming from a very different place. Um, we teach creative writing and poetry uh, using history, um, using emotion. Um, and what we do, when we come in, we say, we're just going to give you tools for your toolbox. And these tools, we guarantee, will not only help you be a better writer, but they will improve your communication skills, your ability to interact with people. And so what we're coming in there with is not just, this is how you write a poem. We come in there talking about the power of your words, the power of language, um, how to get your point across, your message across without being angry. We tell them about how emotions work. One of the things I always tell my kids is you're operating out of only two emotions. Everything else is a secondary emotion. Those two emotions are love and fear. So every time you're angry and you're acting out in an angry way, that comes out of fear. So you need to get to the bottom of it. What is it you're actually afraid of? And what is it you actually want to come out of this? And learn to communicate that, whether it's in writing or spoken. So we work from that perspective to get them to not have to use the behaviors they've used in the past, to because a lot of it is acting out because they can't verbalize how they feel. They can't verbalize, or they think people don't care how they feel. And just giving them tools to put in the toolbox to better navigate the world around them. And so that's where we're coming from when we go in there and work with them with poetry and creative writing.
Well, thank you for doing that work. That's I'm sure they miss you right now.
Mhm.
Erica, you have another question for Michelle, right?
Yes, I do. This one is from our own Mary Yeager. You might know her. She runs our Speakers Bureau with Humanities Nebraska. She wants you to tell us a little bit about bringing up young people in this tradition.
What you do is you start, because the way I was brought up in this tradition, it takes place in most African American families. There's a lot of storytelling. And so what I do when I work with young people that are not in my family, I tell them my story a lot of times. And I tell them stories about people in my family, stories my grandmother told me. And they can typically relate to them because the culture has a lot of similarities among families and things like that. And, some of them are funny, but they're very engaging. And I tell them, I said, you're also a storyteller. You just don't know it yet. I said, anytime you sit down with a group of your friends and you're telling about what happened to you last night, or something your father did that you didn't appreciate, things like that. And so what we're just doing is making it memorable. How do you remember stories? And the thing is that stories that they remember that their grandparents told them or that their parents told them, they remember because they were musical, they were animated, they were full of relatable metaphor, those kinds of things. And so that's what we do.
Michelle, how about reading us something else, or
Oh, sure.
whatever moves you?
I did a poem that kind of talked about growing up here in North Omaha. And anyway, I'll go ahead and read it. It's called I'm Okay With That. I grew up on hula hoops and jump ropes, hopscotch lines in my grandmama's driveway, street light alarm clocks, mulberry bushes in the alley were our after school snacks on crackers, potato chips with hot sauce, syrup sandwiches, Kicks and Cheerios, blue charm suckers from F&L's. Yeah, Mr. Westbrook's store. It was Black owned. He had chocolate coins and real ones, pickled pig's feet on the counter in old pickle jars. Grandmama had me bring her one every Saturday. We watched The Lone Ranger with Pops on Sundays and ironed our school clothes with crisp creases because we was representing the family. So we had to be clean, no matter. We had drunks on the corner mumbling about Big Brother, who wasn't a brother. What some formed some white rocks and that broke in the neighborhood block by block. Big Brother drove black and white Fords topped with cherries and berries on the prowl for rotten apples. And we always seemed to fit the description. Young, black, and gifted, melanated meant criminally inclined and fine all the time. I loved them niggas regardless. I came of age in knit leggings and big teased hair and horny white men. Computers peeking over the sunrise with CDs and beepers. Drug dealers and pimps were uncles and cousins. They drove Bonnevilles, Cadillacs, LTDs with rag tops and Buick Electra 225s, just like my dad. My daddy owned his own business too. He was a boss. And we didn't know no different. Family was family, including folks that didn't have family. Come on and get you a plate. Better clean your plate because there was kids starving in Africa. I graduated knowing my blackness was a gift, just like raindrops in the summertime in the sway of my auntie's hips. It was cool. It made me strong. My grandmother, tough as beef jerky and concrete, coated in bronze, taught me to hold my head up, walk with my shoulders square, look folks in the eye and don't take no shit. Call spades spades and be thankful for your blessings. Because this life ain't yours. Take your place in the kingdom or the queendom amongst the ancestors. In this city of white folks named from natives, we stay in our places because that's what we were taught. Hellfire on the other side of 72nd Street, and ain't no hair grease skins or paintings of Jesus with locks out there. And we were okay with that.
That's great. I know that you have spent time in Western Nebraska because I've seen you out there. And so that just makes me think about, in this state, it's just so, I think maybe a lot of states are this way, the difference between, growing up in urban areas and really rural areas. And there's similarities when we're, as Humanities Nebraska is doing work around the state where, the lack of resources in really small towns in greater Nebraska and the lack of resources in a place like North Omaha, and yet so starkly different in so many ways as well. And I'm just wondering, when you do programs for audiences in small towns or outside of North Omaha or outside of Omaha at all, how do you connect with people, or how do you try to convey, that what you just read gives a glimpse of you, but like, how do you connect with people?
Out in Western Nebraska, we all have stories to tell. And pain is pain, struggle is struggle. And when I talk about my own personal history, or something about my grandmother, or how I was raised or how I grew up, we all have that. Yours may be different from mine. And it's incumbent upon all of us, if we're going to learn about each other, is to tell those stories. One thing I love about Louder Than a Bomb is that we have kids from every walk of life who are speaking their experiences in their voices. And I have kids from North Omaha schools up there with kids from Ogallala or Gothenburg. And seeing each other's pain and seeing each other's joy, they realize they have much more in common than they have different. When they talk about a loss of a loved one, we all know what that feels like. We all know the feeling of a breakup and a heartbreak. There are certain common human experiences that we all share. And yes, culture may be a little different. The way we handle certain situations may be a little different, but we can speak to each other and come together on common ground in so many ways. And Louder Than a Bomb shows me that every year. And I was just so disappointed we had to cancel this year. One of the greatest experiences I've had with Louder Than a Bomb is, this was one of the preliminary rounds. We had South High, which was primarily Hispanic. We had a team from, I think it was Gretna. We had Benson High, which is North Omaha, and a team from Lincoln, I think. And, oh no, it was Council Bluffs. And so after the first round, before we went into the group pieces, the DJ was playing music. These kids all got together and line danced together. We had Hispanic kids, we had rural white kids, we had Black kids. They all got together and line danced. And it was one of the most beautiful moments to see all of these young people honoring each other's experiences and loving each other's stories. It was absolutely amazing. And I was hooked from then on. That was the first year I was with Nebraska Writers Collective. So yeah, it was huge for me.
That's all beautiful comments. And Eric and I both have been to Louder Than a Bomb on several occasions, and we talked about it with Matt a little bit last week too, and certainly agree that it was just, it's remarkable in all the ways you just described. But if I could have seen that line, I would have paid good money to have seen that. That's just amazing. Erica, do I see we have another question?
Yes, we do have a question from Ellen Lyric. She's in Alliance. She says, Michelle, do you have a teacher who inspired you to value the power of language and storytelling?
An official teacher, probably not. Like I said, my grandmother and my dad. And let me say this, grandmothers. I'm biracial, and I talk a lot about the storytelling of my African-American grandmother. She was amazing at it. But my white grandmother was also a great storyteller. And I think it was the era that they came from. They were before television. They were, so that was the entertainment. You listened to stories being told over the radio, or you told stories as entertainment. So I think I learned the power of it and the entertainment aspect of it from them. I've also learned a lot from my fellow poets out there, Felicia Webster being one, a lot of the rappers out there. I've learned so much from. The wordsmiths with me, DeVelle Crisp, Shakura Huggins, Paula Bell, just amazing, amazing poets and spoken word artists. I've learned a lot from Matt Mason. So yeah, I'm still learning. I'm still trying to improve my craft. It was so funny. My mother was worried about me saving for retirement. I said, what I do for a living, I don't have to retire.
I
don't have to retire.
The hunger to continue learning is something that fuels all of us, and I think it's the key to a long and happy life, right?
Yeah.
And I know we don't have a whole lot of time left, but I think I'm sure people would really appreciate hearing something else. If you have anything else in front of you, or I mean, we can go with more questions if you want, but.
Well, I'd love to get some more questions, but yeah, I don't mind doing another piece. So if we have any questions out there, I can do that.
Why don't we do another piece? And unless Erica, do we have anything else you want to throw out right now? Okay, why don't we go ahead and then we'll see if we have any other questions.
Okay. I don't think I've ever done this one out loud, so bear with me on this one. This one's called Low Expectations.
Sounds perfect for me.
All right. We are the product of low expectations. Evidence left at a crime scene of diminished returns on our humanity. We bear crosses of our forefathers' sins planted in fields of desert sand and the fossils of soulless creatures in the pages of scriptures. Our dreams were lofty as the moons of Jupiter, and we flung caution to the windless atmosphere in haste. We stopped reading the drivel of others wasted in the pages of books because we had to have our meals in 4 minutes or less, our tweets in 280 characters or less, selfies in bathrooms, our lives baked in a nonstick pan and coated in cancer. Weddings, births, deaths, breakups, hookups, barbecue Betty, swimming pool Sally, and the latest black man gunned down by police. I can't breathe. And then someone hollered, "World Star!" And we commented on it all. We laughed at the violent demise of a fellow human being. Yes, we liked, laughed, and loved ass kickings, our hieroglyphs back in the form of smiley faces, hearts even in different hues, and praying hands that were really high fives. We now communicate our deepest feelings via emojis that look like us. Avatars, how ironic. We got too comfortable in squalor, nose blind to the stench of stupidity, greed, and fear. It rose up from the sewer grates in cracked streets riddled with potholes and human excrement. Our water is clouded and dingy because we defecate upstream, so our children are heavy with lead and false hope. We all drank from the same ladle dipped in hate, racism, xenophobia, misogyny, and trans murder. It chokes the melanated the most. The clear-skinned and pink-hued are immune sometimes, unless they deviate from the plan. We gasp for air our ancestors sucked in the garden when bees were abundant, pollinated all the flowers no matter the color of their petals. And rivers flowed from mountaintops to valleys littered with that which man can't control. Our drums beat. They cannot seem to silence them, for the heart of man is small and fleeting, but the soul moves with power and precision through women striking the taut hide, with grace, persistence, and tenaciousness never duplicated. We are indeed tired, no matter the expectations. Mother Earth will beat on. Mother Earth will spin on without us. The rivers will flow, the oceans will churn, and new species will rise in our place. And they will find only the dust of our bones and the evidence of our folly, styrofoam and plastic bags, our frivolous ways in which we hated our brothers and sisters because of fear. And we devised the most horrific ways to decide who shall suffer, and those who suffered did suffer. Death is a blessing. Cloaked in lush forests and snowy mountaintops and beside the waves of open seas. And those who lived in fear of being without destroyed all that was within. All because we had misguided goals and silly dreams and low expectations.
Wow. I find it hard to believe you haven't read that one before. That was beautiful.
I haven't.
Thank you. And I know we're going to wrap up, but I think there's at least one more question. Erica, do you have that in front of you?
Yeah, we have another question from Matt Steinhausen from Lincoln. He says, I'm curious about the writing process and at what point you decide a piece is finished.
It's funny because I hear them first. So they'll come to me and I'll either speak a little bit of them into my voice recorder, and that'll give me the gist of what I want to write about. And by the time I actually write them, because they marinate in my head for quite a while. So they'll be sitting there and I'll be getting the point that I want to make, the words I need, they'll all be churning in there and marinating. And so when I sit down to write it, there's very little in terms of editing. It's pretty much written in my head. So once I get it on paper, it's like, when I read it out loud, I might change a phrase or two, but yeah, that's kind of the process I take.
Thanks,
Like I said, it's
Michelle.
all from the gut.
Yeah,
Mhm.
thank you. I think we're probably wrapping up now, and I'm just wondering, is there anything we left out that you wanted to talk about before we close?
I think that the public school system is really missing out on the teaching process that we could bring using poetry and spoken word. I am teaching history, I'm teaching speech, I'm teaching writing, I am teaching life skills, all through one art form. Using the arts to teach is incredibly important. We learned our ABCs in a song. You know, it's, I think, incredibly important that we keep it, we fund it, and we use it.
Yeah.
So.
You're an amazing spokesperson for that. And I think the Louder Than a Bomb program is a great foot in the door and pushing that forward. And I think as schools see the difference that's making in kids' lives and the difference that people like you are making in kids' lives, it hopefully will keep pushing that door open further. And I think a lot of art teachers and others would agree with you around the state on that. So thank you. And just thanks for all you do. And I look forward to when things open up again and you're out giving programs with Humanities Nebraska and just, your work with the Writers Collective. And we'll look forward to Louder Than a Bomb next year, of course. And so I'll just kind of wrap up, but we'll have this recorded and put out for everybody. So
well, I'd like to say thank you. Thank Humanities Nebraska for providing resources for what we do. So I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate that. And that's a great segue to a final comment I had, is that today we put out an announcement for grants that we're going to be pushing out the door for relief funding for cultural organizations all across the state at this time when their revenue sources have really been cut down and everybody's in economic hardship. So encourage everybody to watch for that. That press release went out today, and those grants open up tomorrow, and it's through assistance partnership with the National Endowment for the Humanities. Nebraska Arts Council is doing similar grant outreach through funding from the Nebraska or the National Endowment for the Arts. And between us, we hope to really help all the cultural organizations around the state at this time pay bills and so forth as we try to keep the arts and humanities and culture part of everyone's life. I also wanted to mention that Humanities at Home will be back again next week, and we're going to do I think, a fun program on Tuesday night, May 5th, Cinco de Mayo, and it's going to be bilingual English-Spanish with a great storytelling team based out of Grand Island. That's part of our primetime family reading time. And so if you've got little ones at home, and if you are interested in Spanish and English, kind of a bilingual storytelling program, that's what we're going to roll out at 7 o'clock Tuesday night, May 5th. And we'll just keep doing these every week, hopefully, and just and look forward to continue to work with Michelle and other people around the state. We're just really blessed to have so many creative and passionate people in the community and the state that believe in the value of the humanities as nurturing our souls and our minds and helping us figure our way forward. So thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. And thanks again to Michelle.
Thank you.
All right.